Today from West Point, President Obama laying out his foreign policy plan and strategy to combat terrorism. How will the president's plan resonate with Americans? Was his speech spot on, or did it miss the mark? And embattled New York Congressman Michael Grimm, known for taking jabs at the media, literally. He says the media trying to run him out of town, but the attacks are only making him stronger. It's a tough argument to sell. Grimm promising a hard-nosed re-election campaign. Is this delusional, or can he actually keep his job? And the battle over internet privacy takes center stage in Europe, where a court ruling says Google has to get rid of embarrassing personal information about its users when requested. We'll talk about what that means for you. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. And we begin in West Point, where President Obama this morning unveiled his foreign policy plan before the U.S. military academy's graduating class. Now, the class among the first since 9/11 that may not be sent into combat in Iraq or Afghanistan.
This generation of men and women in uniform know all too well the wages of war. And that includes those of you here at West Point. 4 of the service members who stood in the audience when I announced the surge of our forces in Afghanistan gave their lives in that effort. A lot more were wounded. I believe America's security demanded those deployments, but I am haunted by those deaths. I am haunted by those wounds. And I would betray my duty to you and to the country we love if I ever sent you into harm's way simply because I saw a problem somewhere in the world that needed to be fixed, or because I was worried about critics who think military intervention is the only way for America to avoid looking weak.
Well, the president announced yesterday that his plan to have all troops, with exception of military personnel, to be out of Afghanistan by 2016. And today the president focused on foreign policy, saying the U.S. must show restraint before rushing into military operations overseas when there is a conflict. The president also said the U.S. will use force when necessary. However, it is strong when it has backup and doesn't act alone. All right, a lot to chew on from today, and let's bring in our panel. Tonight, we are joined by Michael Lyons, a retired Army major, military analyst, senior fellow at the Truman National Security Project, who was there in attendance at West Point today. Dominic Carter, who was not there, but political journalist and author, and Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent as well. All right, first of all, you were in attendance, and we got a preview a little bit yesterday of what he was going to say, and this was a non-too-subtle shot back at critics who said, some say that, he's overreached at times, and others who say that he should have been more active in places like Syria and elsewhere. And he was pretty full-throated in terms of why he says you can't have it every which way, and we got to learn lessons from the last 10, 12 years.
Yeah, he focused too much, I think, on his critics. He missed the mark because he really had a chance to set a new vision for a foreign policy and kind of ignore those things in the past. He got a couple of shots in at George Bush and the previous administration, and even go back even before that with other administrations. He really could have had the opportunity to lay out what that vision would be. He laid up all these straw mans about America being an isolationist country to go after the neocons, and then the ones that want to intervene in all these actions without any real military solution. So he told the cadets, we're no longer going to lead with the military, which, again, the war is an extension of foreign policy. I think that's a good thing inherently, but he's got to do more to explain what that really means.
So did you walk away not knowing where the new threshold is when we get into a fight and where it isn't, if we need to have quote-unquote backup the next time we go in or not? Was there clarity to you or not? No,
there wasn't clarity, unfortunately, and I think the cadets were looking for some kind of inspiration other than to be told that it's likely you won't be in war in Iraq and Afghanistan. And there are different measures of military action. For example, the president could use drones and could use possibly air power and even other soft power. I mean, what's really happening in Libya is soft power. Nigeria is soft power, use of our great technology with regard to giving intelligence and information to these other countries.
You know, Dominic, one of the points that he was trying to draw a line on was, hey, I inherited Iraq and I inherited Afghanistan, but you guys tried to get me into Syria. Let's play that quick bite as the president's referenced Syria directly.
I will work with Congress to ramp up support for those in the Syrian opposition who offer the best alternative to terrorists and brutal dictators.
He also went on to say, though, Dom, that, hey, for those of you out there who wanted us to go in, what did you think we were going to accomplish at the end of the day? And he made the point that the American public's with him as it relates to this new restraint. Is he right?
In my opinion, definitely. I think it's refreshing. I can understand it from the perspective of the military and your point of view, but I think that the American people, I think you hit it on the head, Richard, the American people are tired of war. Iraq, Afghanistan, and with this president going to West Point and reflecting that, hey, you know, since the last time I've been here, we lost, I believe he said, 4 members of your class. That connects with people. 4 lives.
4 members of a class that he spoke to about the surge, a surge that he asked for, and
so
he said he was
connects.
haunted by their deaths, and who knows, but I did get the impression that it wasn't just the scripted line there, and I think every commander-in-chief, regardless of politics, that's the worst part of the gig. You're sending young people here to die for something that you're calling on it. And I don't know, Andrew, I got where he was going with this, but I also got the impression that we still want to have it both ways. That when there's a moral imperative, and we'll decide, I guess, whoever's there, what that moral imperative is. But talked about Nigeria, is that a moral imperative? I guess not. Syria, well, we can still help, but he wasn't clear about who he's picking to help out.
Well, we talked before about the lack of a doctrine in this speech with the opportunity to present one, or the lack of any hard red lines or concrete lines. My takeaway from the speech is that is his, if not doctrine, his legacy on this, which is there shouldn't be a one concrete doctrine or one concrete legacy or one concrete fine line as to where and when we're going to use our troops. I think he wants to leave it flexible. He's certainly reticent to send troops into harm's way, and he made it very clear that we're not sending troops into Syria. That's one definite takeaway from all this. But that I think he wants to sort of turn the clock back to the pre-9/11 era of we're going to decide based on our national interest and whatever that flexible interest might be as to when we use troops and when we don't use troops.
I think there was also something basic, even more based than that, where he wanted to make clear he's not a wimp, right? And that he thinks, and he wants people to think, but that by not going into Syria, that not threatening to go into Ukraine, that doesn't make him a chicken. Now, we laugh and say, well, who cares? Well, I think he cares about that there's this perception out there. He thought he built more equity getting Osama, and at the end of the day, you still have some of the folks here from the McCains of the world saying, you know, show some backbone here, and I think that drives him nuts.
Well, I'm sure it does, and we were talking before about what I thought was the biggest foreign policy headline of the day, which is a new IAEA report that shows that Iran is degrading its nuclear program. They're down to a fifth of what they need to put a weapon together. They're actually lessening their stockpile. That's all from diplomacy, despite years of calls for attacks and attacks and attacks.
I'm curious from the military side. There's been a lot of complaints, which is over the years, which is, hey, they'll cut the military, and then we'll expect the military to do more and more. Right. And then when they come back, they don't take care of the guys the right way or equip them the right way to get in there. But on the flip side, when you have another president who says, I'm not going to send you more into harm's way, then I think there's a converse reaction to say, time out here. Yeah. Is it an impossible balance that the men and women who literally aren't, when they throw their hats up in the air, they're not going to a kegger, right? They're getting ready for a deployment somewhere. Mm-hmm. What do they want to hear?
So here's a president.
You're a graduate yourself, so people may not remember. Yeah.
Well, so right, the audience there, right? Most of the audience are, besides the cadets, the parents of cadets who are a lot of former military. So that clearly most of the audience there is a military audience listening to what the president's saying. Here's a president that's cut the budget to active end strength numbers below what we had before Pearl Harbor, less than 450,000 active duty troops. So, and that coupled with the op tempo, which is the pace that the military runs, the Army in particular runs, just gets ratcheted up more and more. We're taking our forces that were once deployed overseas and we're bringing them home to the United States. However, we reserve the right to send them back overseas. So in some ways, the Army's becoming the Navy or the French Foreign Legion. They could potentially still be deployed overseas. And that has got the military, Army in particular, very concerned. They're concerned that we ask for too much, and sometimes the Army is its own worst enemy because it can never say no. It doesn't know when to say no.
And these criticisms, they even came back. You go back to the days of Rumsfeld when he was running the DOD. I mean, it was the same thing, a leaner military and everything else. So they're like, yeah, but yet you're sending us to Afghanistan or Iraq, and you're having our guys do deployment after redeployment after redeployment. Is there a doctrine that can come out, or is Andrew right that it's such a more complicated world where you're not fighting nation states that one size can't fit all?
Yeah, that's the issue. We're so boxed into a nation state and boundaries and clear enemies and places where we know where the enemy exists and we can kind of go get them. And until you have the cooperation of all the countries of the world, until you probably prop up a lot of the failed third world nation states that are out there, Africa is unfortunately a ripe environment for these terrorist organizations to exist. They operate freely. Boko Haram, where they are in Nigeria, for example, they own about 36,000 square miles of territory themselves. It is difficult. The question gets back to, at one point, do they become really, truly an existential threat to the United States? There are some who say we're actually the safest we've ever been. This is the safest world we've ever lived in.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. In the last 2.5 years, the final 2.5 years of this president's administration, what are the choices he'll be faced with, and what kind of markers he'll lay down for the next person in the Oval Office? Mike, as always, I really appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank you so much. Long day for this guy today. All right, everybody, head over to Facebook and Twitter to sound off on today's question. Do you agree with the president's foreign policy plan? All right, when we come back, though, we will switch gears and talk some politics and battle New York Congressman Mr. Grimm here, taking more shots at the media, saying that the media trying to run him out of town. We're going to get into what is rhetoric and what's reality after this.